Previously on Under 10 Hours.
There's something I feel like I'm missing, something that I missed as a kid, but it always eluded me and intrigued me.
WWF No Mercy.
WWF No Mercy is a game that I missed out on completely up until this point somehow. When it came out in 2000, I was just 6 years old at the time, and I wasn't exactly on the pulse of video game news. Besides, I had just gotten my N64 the previous Christmas, and I was laser focused on completing Mario 64 with my friends. I didn't even get my first wrestling game, WCW vs. NWO World Tour, until 2001, and while that game was very dated by the time I got it, it was still new to me because it was a new game. And even if I would have known about No Mercy, the game was rated T for teen, something that was a no-go for my parents.
It wasn't until the late 2000s that I heard about the legend of No Mercy when I was Googling lists of the best wrestling games of all time, and No Mercy topped almost every list I came across. It used the Aki engine I loved from WCW NWO Revenge and World Tour. It had a full-on story mode to play. I even saw how to bring current WWE wrestlers into the game using the Create a Wrestler mode. The game looked amazing, but I never had a computer that could emulate N64 games well, and the prices on cartridges were well out of my price range because I only had so much birthday money that I had to make last the whole year. WWF No Mercy turns 20 years old this month, so when is a better time than now to look back on this historic game for the very first time? As I said in the last video and earlier on in this one, I love the Aki engine used in the early WCW and later WWF wrestling games. To me, there really isn't a more approachable, fun to pick up and play wrestling engine because it is simple on its surface with more depth than meets the eye. It feels arcadey and fun because it isn't too fast, but it isn't too slow either. Each wrestler has a list of grapples and strikes. Grapples are delegated to the A button and strikes are mapped to the B button. Simple, right? Yes, you give a controller to somebody and tell them that, they'll get it. But the move sets for the wrestlers go way deeper than that. If you hold the A or B button, they will do a respective strong grapple or strike, which does more damage. If you hold different directions on the D-pad while doing these, you'll do different moves. And combining these methods and pressing the B button while doing grapples reveals even more moves to see. You've got a run button and a reversal button, and a multi-purpose button that controls picking up weapons, flipping opponents over, and grabbing weapons from the crowd. The catch-all works pretty well, and the only issue I consistently had with it was when a weapon was too close to a downed opponent, and I would flip them over instead of grabbing the weapon. It's not even that big of a deal, it's just something I noticed. It's not exactly unique to No Mercy either, as this is a problem in almost every Aki game. Every wrestler has their signature and special moves. As a match rages on, each wrestler's attitude meter fluctuates as they lay the smackdown or have the smackdown laid upon them. This meter helps matches flow as momentum shifts between the wrestlers. If a wrestler manages to reach special, they can do their finishing move. Simply get into position for the wrestler's finisher, do a strong grapple, and flick the analog stick in any direction. It's a bit weird, granted, but it works fine. It makes doing a finisher deliberate and a bit more tense as there's always a small window where it gets reversed, or if you aren't positive you'll have enough time to get the move off. As opposed to the WCW games that I played before it, No Mercy also flaunts a bunch of different novelty matches like the Royal Rumble, ladder matches, and steel cage matches. You can also do backstage brawls. These are by far the best novelty match because you don't just wrestle in a single area. The rooms are all interconnected so you can start in the boiler room, then fight into interconnected hallways, and out into the actual arena. The idea of a fleshed out, behind the scenes area rarely shows up in modern games, so I was stunned to see it implemented so well here. The ladder match is one of my favorite matches in wrestling, so I was pretty excited to see that it was in No Mercy. It's serviceable enough, you can have them with more than 2 people in the ring going for the belt, it just feels very 1.0. It's probably more fun with friends than anything, honestly. Steel cage matches were actually something I wasn't expecting to see. First to leave the steel cage wins as ever, but it's a pretty fun match type. It's very simple like the ladder match, but it's good enough. The slow climb up the cage is heated like it should be. You're climbing, hoping your opponent doesn't get up so they can drag you back down to the mat. It's also incorporated in some of the story modes. You get to fight Vince McMahon in the cage. It's very Stone Cold era. The Royal Rumble is a lot of fun, and I spent hours playing it with my sister when we were kids, because it's copied and pasted from WCW NWO Revenge. It appears as though the developers weren't given the #1 rule of the WWF Royal Rumble, which is, in order to be eliminated, a superstar must be thrown over the top rope, and both feet must touch the floor. Because wrestlers will get eliminated when they hit the ground no matter what, through the middle of the ropes and all. There's also no way to select 30 wrestlers because the mode only allows a multiple of 4 wrestlers to be in the match, meaning you can only have 28 or 32 wrestlers, but never 30. It's a very strange whiff because the Rumble also makes an appearance in the story mode, and you have to fight your way past 31 other wrestlers to win. My only real complaint about the gameplay is that the game has a tendency to slow down a bit when more than 2 wrestlers are on the screen at once, which slows the Royal Rumble in the story down to a crawl. It's not a deal breaker, but going from singles matches to the Rumble and then back again in the story is pretty jarring. The presentation in No Mercy is top-notch, with every superstar having their very own entrance animations true to their TV counterparts. And my favorite addition above all else is the inclusion of real wrestler theme songs that play when they walk into the arena. Of course, it's a little bit compressed because of the N64, but it's great that it's here. And speaking of arenas, there are 10 different ones that include Raw and SmackDown, as well as 8 other pay-per-views. My favorite, based solely on nostalgia, is the Royal Rumble arena where the iconic taxi is perched above the entrance ramp. It is perfect. Each of the arenas have an announcer table you can crunch during matches, and with the ability to grab weapons from the crowd, any match has the potential to become a hardcore brawl in seconds. The developers did a great job recreating the Attitude Era sets. No Mercy retains the signature look of every Aki wrestling game, especially in the N64. You know the look, the one that makes you say, oh yeah, that's an Aki game. Wrestlers look chunky and polygonal, and by all accounts, you could probably say the models in this game look bad. But I find a certain charm in the look, especially on the horrible meat grinder faces glued onto the wrestler models. Let's take a moment of silence for the superstars harmed in the making of these faces. The main mode of the game is the Championship mode, which has you taking a superstar of your choosing to get the gold. No Mercy's take on the Championship is refreshing to say the least, because there are many story elements attached to the mode as opposed to just fighting different wrestlers until you get your title bout. Instead of having to start over if you lose, the story is affected depending on wins and losses and sends you down different story paths. This was one of the first wrestling games to acknowledge and incorporate a changing story element to the single-player mode, so some hiccups are expected. At its best, the Championship mode is a fun experience that has a variety of outcomes as you battle your way to the best ending, holding championship gold. I had a great time with the Hardcore Championship, and defending it 24 hours a day was fun because people were just running up to you and trying to beat the crap out of you to steal the title belt. It was very true to the belt and encapsulated the stress of holding a championship that could be snatched at any moment. At its worst though, Championship mode is a repetitive pain where you're playing way more 2-on-1 matches than you should be. These matches simply aren't very fun at all. The World Heavyweight Championship storyline is the worst for this because most of these matches have nothing to do with getting the title if you don't win the Royal Rumble right off the bat. Most of the storyline is making Triple H mad at you for throwing a 10-year-old kid's temper tantrum and calling Stephanie a variety of mean names. This results in Hunter stacking the cards against you for just about every match. When you're in the unfortunate position of being teamed up on, you're going to get crushed as 2 people bludgeon you until you can't fight anymore. If you do manage to get the upper hand for a bit, your opponents won't stay down long enough to isolate them from one another. I feel lucky for even being able to finish this fight at all. And then within a match or two from here, there's a string of quote-unquote singles matches where interference comes in and turns the tables against you yet again before becoming a full-on handicap match the next fight. These 2 fights are back-to-back, so you're essentially doing the exact same thing twice in a row with a slight difficulty increase the second time around. And then once you finally get your one-on-one match with the champion and win, he just goes, "Well, that didn't happen, crowd. You saw nothing." And you just relinquish the belt. Like, what is even the point of any of this? My biggest complaint with the story mode is sometimes you're allowed to lose, other times you aren't and have to win under specific circumstances before you run out of retries. So the promise of branching storylines only goes so far, and I was pretty disappointed that I couldn't see what happened if Vince McMahon got his way after his cronies jumped Kane in a bar. Where I finally drew the line and rage quit was the tag match where the only way forward is to pin Triple H. After spending a couple of hours of getting my ass handed to me, I finally saw a glimmer of hope and made him submit. Mission failed. You have to pin him and only him. Pinning Benoit makes you lose too, so why even give you a tag match in the first place? It doesn't make any sense. And I also hated that if you lose and decide to quit, you don't get any of the SmackDown Mall money you earned. You can hit a brick wall with this particular storyline very easily, and I hit that wall myself before writing this paragraph if you're wondering why it's dripping with venom. There was a smaller problem I noticed where the order of some of these stories play out. I played the Intercontinental, the WWF Championship, and Hardcore Championship modes, and once I beat the Hardcore Championship mode with Matt Hardy, I decided to go back with Matt and see what happens if you choose a champion to play the story with. The story has you defend your title, and if you lose, the story turns into a tutorial. Shawn Michaels teaches you how to grapple, and after playing the story mode 3 times, why wait until I'm the champion to teach me how to play the game? In that same vein, different chapters seemingly played out of order. After I beat Vince in the steel cage, the next chapter is him provoking Kane into hitting him, but Kane refuses and says he'd rather wait to punch McMahon until the steel cage match that already happened. For all I've complained about, the story mode is pretty good here, and the branching paths, as limited as some of the championships might be, are still interesting to go through. But God, the opponents in later chapters are unbelievable. It can be downright infuriating watching them reverse every single attack you throw at them. My only suggestion if you want to play this is, lower the difficulty a bit before you start so by the time you reach the later chapters, you'll have a fairer fight. But if you do manage to fight your way to the finish, you're treated to the message and support we all need right now. Thanks, No Mercy. You're the calm in the 2020 storm. WWF No Mercy features more than 70 wrestlers, which is very respectable. Like a lot of wrestling games, there are some jobbers making up the roster, and how well you like the selection will likely come down to if you're a WWF or a WCW person. You have all the big names like The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Triple H, Undertaker, and Kane, obviously. You also have some great tag teams like the Hardy Boys or the Dudleys, both Bubba Ray and Devon. It has a ton of unlockable wrestlers too, like Andre the Giant, Vince and Shane McMahon, and Jerry Lawler. What is a little odd is that some of the standard wrestlers on the roster like Shawn Michaels and Ken Shamrock have to be purchased from the SmackDown Mall area in the game. As a huge HBK fan, it was quite a bummer to not be able to play as him right off the bat, and it was also incredibly disappointing that more legends weren't unlockable. Instead, Linda McMahon, Gerald Briscoe, and Pat Patterson were some of the characters you could earn through playing. Not to take anything away from them, but like, really? I do have to remember that WCW was eating most of the WWF locker room like Tic Tacs, and many Hall of Fame wrestlers were on WCW's dime, so maybe they didn't have as many big names at their disposal as they'd have liked. But it doesn't really matter if your favorite wrestler is included in the game or not because of No Mercy's incredibly deep Create a Wrestler mode. Let's get started with a small appetizer, shall we? No Mercy gives you the option to edit superstar appearances and names that already exist in the game, so you can keep the wrestlers up to date with their current personas. As I mentioned in the last video, wrestling games historically are out of date almost the moment they come out, because wrestlers change costumes, moves, shows, etc., and with No Mercy you can make sure that's never an issue. But the real entree is creating a wrestler from scratch. I think No Mercy has the perfect Create a Wrestler mode. I really do. It's deep where it needs to be and simple in other spots. While SmackDown vs. Raw and the WWE 2K games have extensive creative modes that let you tweak just about everything to do with your wrestler. But honestly, I never find that much control compelling. Tons of people love the complexity and do amazing things with it, but it's not my bag. When I want to recreate a wrestler that already exists, I just want it to be simple. No Mercy offers that. It is almost absurd how many moves there are to map to your superstars, and there are so many recognizable finishing moves from the game that you can recreate respectable versions of just about anyone. And if you don't know where to get started with a specific wrestler, I guarantee there is a guide somewhere that will help you out. For instance, I created a very convincing CM Punk. Not because he's my favorite superstar or anything, I just saw some shin guards in the SmackDown Mall and thought, yep, those are some Punk shin guards. And I went from there. But I was stone cold stunned at how easy it was to not only make CM Punk, but how easy it was to find a guide online about how to make the definitive CM Punk in this game, complete with a finishing move that looks close enough to the GTS. It's not 100% perfect, but it results in your opponent being lifted and being plowed into a sharp, hard point of the body. But THQ left in a bunch of finisher animations from earlier games as well, so Kevin Nash's Jackknife Powerbomb and Goldberg's Jackhammer are both in the game, among many others. The SmackDown Mall side of things also lets you unlock more cosmetics, more moves and finishers, and more weapons to give wrestlers. I literally laughed out loud at the idea of a massive slice of cheese being used as a weapon, and I'm looking forward to the day where I can build a Wisconsinian around the idea of a wrestler whose total personality revolves around cheddar cheese.
And back in the day, you could put your created wrestlers on a memory card and take them to your friend's house, so you could battle it out anywhere, and I think that's a pretty cool feature.
Like I said before, whether or not your favorite wrestler is in the game doesn't matter because any WCW star can be faithfully represented as long as you want to take the time to build them, and the same goes for pretty much any modern superstar you can think of. I cannot stress how good this creative mode is, and I believe that it partially has to do with the lasting appeal of the game over other games that use the Aki engine. It's so easy to bring current superstars into it, and when you match that accessibility of the engine with the flexibility of how many kinds of superstars you can create, you get this perfect storm of replayability. There was no way I was going to be able to talk about the lasting legacy of No Mercy without talking about the legacy it leaves behind in the form of a thriving community of fans who are still keeping this game alive, from simple means such as guides on making modern wrestlers to more complex measures like full game mods that are built upon the game. There is an exceptional amount of work that goes into these mods and guides, and after researching for this video, I cannot wait to try some of these. There's WCW Feel the Bang, which is a full overhaul of No Mercy, which shows a sort of alternate universe where the WCW didn't stop hiring Aki to make games and created a WCW NWO Revenge successor. There's also WWF Legends 2.0, which replaces the game with an entirely history-focused game of legends and arenas, and that's just a couple of mods you can try. There are a ton more past that. And lastly, I am very excited I held this video until the big announcement, but AEW just announced a game that takes massive inspiration from WWF No Mercy and the games that came before it, like Virtual Pro Wrestling. They even got the director of No Mercy on board to make sure this game turns out great. It's gonna be a while before we get to play it, but I am super excited for a game that takes this much inspiration from No Mercy, and based off the very tiny video alone, we got to see how much inspiration it actually took, with the reversals and the animations looking like they were stripped straight out of an Aki game. But I could not be more excited for a brand new wrestling game.
One thing I didn't know about until researching WWF No Mercy was that there is a dirty little secret hidden on a bunch of, if not all, of the version 1 cartridges.
Occasionally as you play the game, the cartridge will wipe your save completely, seemingly at any random moment. And given further research, there's little known about how widespread it is or how many cartridges are affected by this issue. What I do know is that if you're looking to emulate this game, be sure to download the revised version. If you're looking for a cartridge for yourself that is unaffected, well, things get a bit stickier there. There was only one way to get a revised copy of No Mercy, and that was sending your cartridge with a receipt into THQ. They would then send you a fixed copy of the game. The way to tell if you have a version 1 copy or a revised version 1.1 copy is by looking at the serial number on the cartridge. If the serial number ends with a -1, regardless of the region, you have the fixed version. If not, you might discover that the game wiped itself when you turn it on one day. Since these weren't mass-produced, you're going to be paying a very pretty penny for one of these. This is easily one of the rarest N64 cartridges to collect, and it seemingly slipped through the cracks on all the rarest N64 game lists. Here's hoping we all find a revised copy at a thrift store or something.
I've been playing with this cartridge since I got it for a few weeks now, and I haven't noticed an issue yet. It even shipped with a bunch of created wrestlers from the previous owner. However, just because I haven't seen an issue yet doesn't mean I never will, and the thought of losing all of my progress and all my SmackDown money is pretty terrifying. You can, of course, like I said earlier, back up all your created wrestlers to a memory card, and a lot of users have said they've gotten around the issue by using a Game Shark to unlock all of the items from the SmackDown Mall. And for some people that works, but if you don't know about this and you just pop this game in and you lose all your progress, it's not a great look.
None of the issues I brought up with the story mode or the specialty matches are game-breaking or ruin the experience of playing No Mercy, but if it sounds like I'm nitpicking the crap out of this game, it's because I am. This is considered the greatest wrestling game of all time, and it was just a bit weird how many oddities there were. But almost nothing about the game outside of the crazy difficulty spike in a few of the story modes ruins how great the game still is. I completely understand why it survived this long, and I know I'm going to be playing it for years to come. There is a reason No Mercy is enduring through the ages, and it comes down to the quality of the game engine, the creative freedom to just make endless wrestlers, and it's the replayability of the branching storylines in the story. It has a ton to offer even 20 years after release. In the last video, I said this: if this game had more game modes and specialty matches, I'd be hard-pressed not to put this at the top of the list.
So with all that said, where does No Mercy go on this list? I'm going to put it right above SmackDown vs. Raw 2006 for a few reasons.
I love the Aki engine more than any other wrestling engine out there, which sets this game very high up on the list by default.
While the story mode is probably better in 2006, and you should definitely go that way if you want a better season mode, No Mercy has a ton of content. Whether it be all the created wrestlers, the roster that's already pretty good already, the fact that there are branching storylines in the story mode as well, which keeps it fun, a variety of different game modes, and the fact that you can have a ton of fun with your friends.
And like I said before, there are so many good wrestling games out there. And no matter if WWF No Mercy is your favorite or not, it's pretty easy to say that it's one of the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. If you've never played it and you love wrestling games, you have to. Just make sure you find a way that won't end up with your save being wiped. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this far in the video. I appreciate it. If you like the video, be sure to leave a like on it. If you have anything to say about No Mercy, whether you love it, hate it, did you play it as a kid, did you just discover it, let me know in the comments down below. And lastly, if you never want to miss one of my videos, because I got tons of videos coming out all the time, be sure to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to make sure you're notified every time I upload. But until next time, thanks again for watching, and have a great rest of your week.
Moab.